So, what is the stroke volume and what will affect the stroke volume? As we know, the heart is just a pump. It has two atria, two ventricles. Obviously, the bigger the pump, the more of the fluid it can push out during one cycle. So when we have the big ventricle, it can push out a lot of blood at once. So the bigger the amount of the blood in the ventricle before it contracts, the more blood it can push out. So this is generally very important for the effectiveness of the heart. Of course, the speed with which it pumps is also very important, but the volume is also critical. About the speed, we already told in the previous topic. However, now a stroke volume. What will affect the stroke volume? First of all, one more time, we are thinking about amount of blood just before the heart contracts. So it's at the end of diastole. What will affect this end diastolic volume, because this is how it is called, the amount of blood that we get into the ventricle. So we fill the blood into the atria and then the atria pushes it into the ventricle. So obviously, if the atria are working properly, they push it effectively, but they need to have something to push into. So what they push? They push the blood that got to them from the veins, yes, into the atria from the veins. But we already know that the blood pressure in the veins is very small. When the blood pressure is small, the blood flow speed can also be very small. So in order to increase the stroke volume, for example, because we need it for the exercises, we need to increase the amount of blood that gets into the atrium, so it can pump it into the ventricle. How to do this? We have a couple of things. First of all, we know that the muscles, when they are contracting, they are also contracting the veins that are inside. This is the muscle pump, and this will make the venous return bigger. We also know that when we are exercising, we are constantly breathing, and breathing in an intense way. So we constantly change the pressure in the chest cavity. And it's also very important. It also leads to pressing and relaxing the blood vessels, the veins that are in the chest. And it will generally work quite similarly, to some extent at least, as a muscle pump. Those two things will lead to more effective flow through the veins and bigger venous return. What is also important? It is quite logical that the more blood we have in the ventricle, the more it can pump out. However, it is also important that the more stretched is the ventricle, the more effective is its contraction. It's a Frank Starling law. So when we are able to stretch the ventricle, so we have a lot of blood and we stretch it, we make its contraction stronger and more effective. So getting the ventricle filled effectively with blood is critical for the stroke volume from all of the sides.